Hey, everybody. Good evening. Tonight, it's me. I'm Douglas A. Burton, and I'm joined by Kamran Pasha, the esteemed Kamran Pasha. And we will be discussing Andor Season 2, which has wrapped. It's official. It is done, and Andor is done. You know, it was always meant to be a two-season show. Season 1 came out in 2022, and then Season 2 just came out this year. And the finale, the final episodes were released last night. I watched them. Kamran has watched them, and we wanted to dig into them. There's a lot about Andor to like. It's a show that has a lot of great things. Some people have even said that it's some of the best Star Wars they've seen since the original trilogy. It is certainly a well-written show, and we wanted to figure out what made this work and maybe where this had some room for criticism. Kamran, did you have any thing you'd like to lead off with in regards to Andor, or some general thoughts about it?
Well, I think we can see that Tony Gilroy, the creator of the show, had a clear vision. I mean, he had a long-term plan for the show. A lot of things he seeded in first season, which we didn't know where they were going to go, if they had any value, were paid off over the course of the entire journey in second season. And I thought, in particular, I think his casting was incredible. I think these were all the right actors, or certainly, I mean, there may have been other actors involved, but these all fit the roles, and really brought them. And the other thing I'll add is, it is one of the most morally complex Star Wars we've seen, because you've got the full range of heroes who are good to not that great, and a full range of villains who are evil to actually pretty sympathetic people that you feel compassion for. And I think that fits into the wisdom of George Lucas. We tend to think of Star Wars in binary terms, but I don't think Lucas thought it that way.
Well, yeah, I think the original Star Wars definitely had that sense of the good side versus the dark side. But there was a lot of characters in between. Luke flirted with the dark side. Vader went back and forth. Han Solo, so you could see characters toggling through the original trilogy all the way along. So I agree with you. And I was actually shocked when I started taking my notes just for this discussion, the number of characters in this show that I know their names now. I know their character arcs, and I'm shocked because there's so many characters, and they're all complex and rich. And now that I've seen where season 2 has gone, I actually have a strong urge to go back, watch season 1 all the way through again, because I feel like I will understand Andor even better. Because there was a lot of times in season 1 and season 2 where, with the slow pacing, I wasn't necessarily positive what was going on all the time. I got a little lost here and there. So I think
I wasn't even positive this guy knew what he was doing, right? And I still think the pacing is one of the things we can critique, right? Because I do think some of it reflects a lack of confidence, at least initially on in his journey, about what he was doing in both seasons, but then he figured it out.
Correct. So let's get into it. Now, just for everyone listening, this is going to start and be mainly a non-spoiler discussion. Near the end, I will warn you, we will discuss some spoilers, because for those who have seen the show, you're probably itching to talk about some specifics or hear someone talk about the specifics, because there's some incredible stuff in Andor season 2, especially. Yeah. So for the non-spoiler section, we're going to lead off by just discussing, where does Andor fit in the whole scheme of Star Wars? There's a wide spectrum. There are people like major Star Wars fans that are boycotting this or not interested in watching this. And then there are some people saying it ranks up there with the original trilogy. I myself will say that Andor places extremely high for me for several reasons. One, the writing is taut. It is great writing. Some of the dialogue is extremely memorable. And in the end, I had some emotional reactions to what I'm watching on the show. And I feel like Andor has added something to Star Wars lore that wasn't there before. And now that it's there, I can't imagine Star Wars without it. And to me, that's vital. That's a huge thing. Kamran, what do you think? Where does it rank for you?
Well, I mean, I think this is very sophisticated adult storytelling. And I've reported on my Patreon from my sources that Jon Favreau really wants to develop two tracks or two tiers of storytelling inside of Lucasfilm, and I think it's a good idea. One is more sort of like the skeleton crew child for children and for young adults, teenagers, and then more morally complex, sophisticated, and serious material for adults. And I think that is smart because, the original Star Wars fans are Generation X, us, right? And we are now adults. We are now people. Many of us have children. Some of us might even have grandchildren, right? And so, what we are perfectly good with adult storytelling. I think that Kathleen Kennedy and her people might have deluded themselves that The Last Jedi was adult storytelling. Maybe Rian Johnson pitched it as that we're going to deconstruct things like mature adults and get rid of simplistic understandings of things. And he just crapped all over the entire mythology, and it was actually in many ways very childish storytelling. It was. I think The Last Jedi was very childish and very unsophisticated in its understanding of the human condition and what motivates people and their journeys at different stages of life. I thought it was a little child going yeah to. I mean, it was a bit bizarre, right? But whereas Andor is a mature adult show, and it really is for adults. I think kids might not fully get it. I think there are some at least some. There's no sex in the show. That there's some implied nooking going on behind scenes and some more than just the simple fairy tale romances of the original series, right? And of the original movies. And so that is, I think, adult material that you have to decide if you want your children exposed to it. But I think the rest of us are able to be mature enough to process it. So yeah, this is a very important development in Star Wars lore. And I really think let's give Kathleen Kennedy her bow. I think she can be proud of a couple of things in her journey. I don't think she has a lot to be proud of, but I think she can be proud of this world of Rogue One. This is part of Rogue One. This is the prequel of Rogue One, and I don't know how much she had influence over it, but I think she made the right choice in Mr. Gilroy's involvement in Rogue One and in this, and giving him authority to do what he wanted to do. So I'd let her take credit for this. If somebody can be 90% wrong and still do some wonderful things. And I think Andor is a wonderful addition to Star Wars.
Well, yeah, whether you like it or not, she's the executive producer on the show, and Rogue One, she under her tutelage, and I'm not here to defend Miss Kennedy, but yes. Rogue One came from the Disney era of Star Wars, and most Star Wars fans have a fond place for Rogue One. And I would say Andor has added to the Rogue One part of Star Wars and actually strengthened it. I had such an urge to go watch Rogue One. In fact, if we weren't doing this, I'd be watching Rogue One right now to catch up on it. So one thing I wanted to discuss was the gamble that I think actually ended up paying off. They changed genres on us with Andor. So I thought of Alien versus Aliens, where you had a genre change of a classic film, which was kind of a straight horror trope type film set in space. And then Aliens went with more of a hard action thing. So you had a genre change, right? And both films are great. So it can be done. And here, I think it was done. I would say Andor is kind of a psychological spy thriller. In terms of a genre, what would you categorize it as?
Yeah, it's espionage, but it's even more than that. I think it is really the deeper issues of rebellion, right? Of the idea of an insurgency, the idea of how do people rise up against a totalitarian environment. Espionage is an arm of that, but it is deeper than that. It's about the broader social implications and about the people that are invested in the sides, which I think is, for me, as I try to be a sophisticated storyteller, I think it's very important to show that, yes, I do believe that, at the extremes of the journey, Lucas wanted, simple binary thing, good Luke Skywalker versus bad Palpatine. And I think in the prequels, he allowed more complexity, and that the Jedi were kind of stupid. They were kind of incompetent and arrogant, right? And that there's more complexity now because you thought they were simple heroes. They led to the downfall of the Republic because of their own arrogance and inability to see reality. And I think that's a fair thing that Lucas was trying to say. So the next stage of that is now showing, well, who's invested in this world, right? And we have characters here who are Imperials, who are bad guys, and they do bad things. You understand them. You understand this is their country. This is the only world they've ever known. This is the only government they've ever known. These are younger people that were probably small children during the Clone Wars. They don't really know world before this reality. They're living in society. The rebellion is just that. It's just people standing up and fighting the existing society. And most of us go through life with all the injustices of the world we live in and just try to do our job, right?
Right.
And make those are moral compromises in our day-to-day lives for many of us. And that's what it's showing there, is that these aren't bad people. They're just people in a world.
Well, and so let's get into the world building here, because I think one of the things that occurred in Andor and in Rogue One was a true insertion of a new Star Wars epic, a period of time in Star Wars that is not so when I think of the original trilogy, I think of the worn universe, the weathered universe. Everything is lived in and old and dated, and there's grease stains on it, and nothing is shiny and new in the original trilogy. And that was by choice, and that was a brilliant choice. Then when you think of the world of the prequels, it's highest society. It's the Republic in a heyday. You know, you've got this imperial, you got the Galactic Senate, you've got all these worlds, there's grandeur and all this. Andor is in between that. So they really do not. What's interesting about this is not the Star Wars universe of a military dictatorship. That's important to understand. A New Hope is when the military dictatorship becomes official. In Episode 4, A New Hope.
Well, I mean, let me. I wouldn't say push back, but let me give more context. I mean, there is a military dictatorship here. The show starts off in first season with a massacre, but the thing is, the massacre takes place in the Republic, right? So it was showing that the seeds of the injustices were in the Republic, right? And so the Aldhani massacre is Republic people, right? It's not Imperials who become Imperials. And so, but there is, and I think the show, especially second season, shows that there is injustice and oppression, but it also shows that people to a large degree have compartmentalized that so that they don't really think to themselves of living in an oppressive society. I think by the end of Andor, and I think the pivotal events of the second half of the second season, people do begin to realize that this is an oppressive society and that something's wrong, and that's the journey.
Right. So let me clarify then what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
In A New Hope, the Emperor Grand Moff Tarkin says the Emperor has dissolved the council. He gets rid of the Imperial Senate in A New Hope. Happens off screen, which is kind of funny in retrospect, but that's when he dissolves this democratic body, the Senate. The Senate is intact, like you said. In the Galactic Republic, we have a very strong democratic institution with the Senate. But in the world of Andor, where the Senate is still intact, but you have a leader who's no longer being elected, right? You've got this kind of permanent chancellor in place with very heavy overtones of different agencies and imperial bureaucracies, doing all of this work. I'm going to call it democratic authoritarianism.
I mean, it is, I think, late stage Roman Republic, early Roman Empire, right? With the rise of dictators and then the emperors, right? It's this thing where there are still institutions that are interacting with the general public and listening to them, because ultimately what democracy, if you want to think of it as that, is just a form of, in Islam we call it shura, which is consultation with the public. The Quran says, leaders should consult with the people, right? Whatever form that takes. So that's what the Senate still is. I mean, they've lost clearly a lot of authority. They are figureheads to some degree, but they seem to at least be connected to the people so that they can hear the people's grievances. And and once the Senate ceases to exist, then there's no one to hear grievances. That's when a society is completely tilted to oppression.
Right. So if you think of the dialogue in Star Wars: A New Hope, he goes, the emperor's dissolved the council permanently. And then he goes, well, how will the emperor maintain control without the bureaucracy? And he goes, regional governors will now have direct control over their star systems. He goes, fear will keep the local systems in line. Fear of this battle station. He's talking about the Death Star. So that's what I mean by pure military dictatorship, where it is the military calling the shots. There are no more of these institutions. The governors are calling it. The emperor is calling it. So Andor is in this. The Andor world is set in what I would call the cosmopolitan empire. Right? We get a look of the empire. It's not this sterile Death Star empire we remember from the sequel or from the original trilogy. This is, there's restaurants and bars and luxury.
There's fashion culture. I mean, I love the costuming on this show. I mean, there's a lot of elegance in Coruscant and other places they go to. It's a beautiful society. You can see that there's something worth saving here in this galactic culture.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's very cosmopolitan, especially on Coruscant. There's a sense that despite the tragic events of the rise of the Empire, that most of these societies have somehow normalized somehow and have tried to carry on. The problem is encroaching upon this effort to normalize is the Empire. And Andor takes place while that encroachment is occurring, and you see the forces that start to galvanize to say, we're doomed if we don't destroy this government. This is bad. So the world building is very special in Andor to me. It's new. It's not the prequels. It's not the OT. It's the Andor world, the cosmopolitan empire, right before the pure dictatorship of the Empire. We also get a couple of new planets in all of this. Of course, in season 1 with Ferrix, in season 2 with Gorman, and then Mina Rao. That's the planet with the wheat, the agricultural planet. So I feel like Andor has contributed something lasting to the Star Wars universe in our imaginations. Yeah. Well, I mean, would you agree with that? Or
I would. And I've said that anything after George Lucas is fan fiction. And I believe that. And I still believe that because I think George Lucas is the creator. And anything after that is fan fiction. Some of it has been bad fan fiction. A lot of it's been bad fan fiction. Some of it has been very good fan fiction. I think a lot of what Jon Favreau did is good fan fiction. I think Rogue One is wonderful fan fiction, is good enough to be included in canon of the original 6 movies, I think. I think it's well in line with them. And I think Andor can be put in that category now because essentially Andor is a miniseries prequel of Rogue One, and since I think Rogue One is up to par with Lucas's material, I think Andor can slip in there. I think Rogue One is a tighter film than Andor is as a series, so there's still criticism to be made of that. But it's this is the kind of fan fiction that maybe smart young fans. Like when I was a kid, maybe I like to think of myself as a smart young fan. I would imagine in my playing with my Star Wars dolls and creating my own movies in my mind, I would imagine scenes of the Imperial Senate long before there were the prequels and we saw it, right? And I would imagine the politics of it because even as a kid, I was interested in just like kingdoms and politics as much as a child can understand it, right? And right. So I think that this is a necessary addition to an expanded universe. If you're going to start exploring as fan fiction this world, I think you had to do something like this, and to their credit, they did it well.
Yes, and I would say it is anchored by great writing. Of course, I'm biased. I'm a writer. You are a professional writer. You're a Hollywood screenwriter. You have done this. You have been paid to do writing, so you are in an industry. You are participating as a professional, and so we might be biased on this. However, I don't think it's too arguable to say that the great writing of this show is what I think has cemented it as, this should be considered as part of the canon with the prequels, with the original trilogy, because the writing is so strong. And when I say the writing is strong, it's not just the dialogue is good or, it's got a good plot line. Tony Gilroy, the visionary of this, he saw something in this era and he found an angle on it and he built out that angle, an era of resistance. And I got a sense that they looked into what resistance movements really look like to create some reality in this show. So I think that the great writing was someone who understood something about the Star Wars universe we had not seen yet, and then had the courage to change the genre and to make it, like you called it, adult Star Wars. So I do think we should discuss the writers briefly. This has there's 3 Gilroys involved in this.
Yeah, I saw Dan Gilroy. Tony, who's the third one?
John Gilroy. They're all
who's
brothers.
Is he a brother? Who's
They're all brothers. Yeah. So Tony Gilroy, Dan Gilroy, and Jonathan Gilroy are all brothers. They're all involved in both Rogue One and in Andor to different degrees. I think one of them was an editor. So the Gilroys are all over this. The Gilroy brothers, led by Tony. Their father, I found this out. It's just worth mentioning. Their father, Frank D. Gilroy, was a playwright who won a Pulitzer Prize a long time ago. So they have writing in the family, the Gilroys. So it was interesting to me to find that out because suddenly I sensed a writing tradition out of the Gilroys. They're also the guys behind the Bourne legacy, the Bourne series. Jason Bourne with Matt Damon. So
Yeah,
they really did bring in
well done movies, I thought.
very well done movies, well accepted films in the spy genre as well. I do think we have to discuss probably the largest, most persistent, and probably the most valid criticism of Andor, which is the pacing. Now, this is part of the writing and the directing, so you have to give credit, even if it's criticism, there as well. I think Andor was plagued by some slow pacing in seasons 1 and season 2, and I think much to its detriment. This was a show that did not command a lot of eyeballs, especially in season 1. I do think that'll change for season 2. I think word of mouth is going to do wonders for this. But, what do you think about the pacing, Andor, season 1 and 2?
I mean, I think your critique is fair, and it's my critique, which is, that I think that in both cases it was unnecessarily slow. And maybe that is Mr. Gilroy's or the Gilroy brothers, the Gilroy trio, right? Maybe that's their vision. Maybe they just believe in slow burns. I mean, we have evidence now of two seasons that's how it goes, right? But that may be their belief that we need time to develop character. Maybe you could argue that in season 1, right? We need to get to know these people more. By season 2, we've gotten to know all our players pretty well. The good thing is season 2, we learn more about them than we thought we knew, and so that's wonderful. But I remain of the view that the first 3 episodes in season 2 were unnecessary. I think you could have just started off with episode 4 and kept building, and maybe that would have freed them up to have 3 more very good episodes. Because I don't see the storytelling point of those first 3 episodes. I don't see how they advance the story in any way, shape, or form. If the idea was to keep him away from a minor spoiler, but to keep Cassian Andor away from his wife Bix, so that she could be in a bad situation with an Imperial officer. There's a lot of ways to achieve that, even in the remaining arc. Right. And I don't think that's worthy of a 3-episode delay of the storytelling, nor did I think that the stuff that they did with regard to revealing the sort of Praetor rebellion on Yavin served any value. I don't even know to this day why we did it. I don't care about those people. They didn't earn my respect. They don't seem like they're going to be the competent people that will one day be the actual rebels. And I don't know why they were on Yavin. Aside from the cool moment at the end of episode 3, where he flies into space and you recognize the grand planet of Yavin. Yavin is a moon, actually, and the grand gas giant of Yavin that you recognize from the original Star Wars. Aside from that's where we are. There was no story purpose that I could delineate from it. So I remain of the view that he didn't need those 3 episodes. In season 2, I think that was also a mistake because with so much wonderful writing coming, a lot of people gave up on those first 3 episodes. It's not even like 1 slow episode. It was 3 slow episodes that served no point storytelling wise, with sort of unlikable characters. And that shot him in the foot for the wonderful 9 episodes to come.
Man, I totally agree. I liked Andor season 1. Like you, I thought it was very slow. The issue was it was slow, but it wasn't bad. Right? So I would watch it and I would sit there and be like, okay. I was like, well, so I was rating it like 6s and 7s, which in the Disney era is good. 6s and 7s means it's not bad. And so it kind of limped along for me, and I watched it, and then there were some episodes I ended up really, really liking in season 1. One Way Out, I thought was just incredible. I gave that a 10 out of 10. That was with Andy Serkis, the big jailbreak. That was an incredible episode. And so I was like, oh, wow. Andor can deliver these high notes. That's pretty amazing. And then, but you heard all the criticism. It did not chart in the Nielsen ratings. It was the famous phrase I hear all the time is it's the greatest Star Wars show that nobody saw. And so my thought was, okay, here comes season 2, 3 years later. Mm-hmm. They're going to open with a bang. And the first maybe 10 minutes of the episode 1 of season 2 was good. It had some action. There was a cool TIE fighter in there. And then very quickly, it just ground to a halt.
But here's an example. What's the point of that TIE fighter? That whole do we ever see that TIE fighter again? Did that serve any purpose in the remaining 9 episodes? I mean, that TIE fighter is pretty cool. It's cooler than Vader's TIE fighter in the original. So I would want to see it. Again, that's a mistake. Yeah. The mistake that, for example, that Ryan Coogler does not make. Ryan Coogler in Sinners pays off everything. every
That's what
little
you should
thing
do as a writer.
pays off. Whereas this is a lot of setup with that whole first 3 episodes was set up with no payoff whatsoever. You can't introduce a basic violation of Chekhov's gun, which is, coming from Anton Chekhov, the great Russian playwright, which is that if you show in act 1 of a play, a gun in a scene, by act 2, act 3, you must shoot the gun. You can't set that up and not pay it off. And so it's the whole arc of this cool, TIE fighter, you're like, it must serve some purpose, right? They've got this cool TIE fighter that they've trained him to fly, and he actually can't fly because it's more advanced and they trained him. But you never see it again. Where are they keeping that TIE fighter? Were they keeping it on Yavin? I mean, he had left Yavin with it. I mean, it made no sense. And that's very disappointing to me because, again, this is just a black hole of 3 episodes that disrupted a really wonderful show that was to come.
I agree. And, the TIE, we'll call it Chekhov's TIE fighter. It never showed up in A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back or Return. This had nothing to do with the trilogy to come, right? So
yeah, there's no payoff even later in the mythology, right? I mean, if Vader had that TIE fighter, if that was the prototype for Vader's TIE fighter,
that would have been cool.
Yeah, because TIE fighters don't have a light speed, but this one does, right? And one of the mysteries we have is, I know there's a lot of comics and other elements that explain how Vader, after surviving the Death Star, well, he's trapped in space, right? We haven't seen that Vader has light speed abilities. How the hell did he get home when he's alone in space in enemy territory, right? How did he get back? And so maybe he had hyperdrive. This thing did, but again, no setup, no payoff.
Yeah. And so I actually lost a little interest in Andor season 2, to be perfectly honest, after those first. Sure. I watched the first episode. Now, I'll even say, you mentioned, is this for kids earlier? I did watch the first episode with my son, and he sat through the first about 25 minutes, very good. And then he started rolling around on the sofa and getting fidgety. And he got up and he goes, how much more? This is always a death knell. He's like, how much more is left? And I have to tap the
are we
remote.
there yet?
I was like, about 10 minutes.
Yeah. So he's no longer on the journey. He's at the destination, which is to get out of it.
He's out. And so he watched one episode. He got mad when he saw me watching episode 2, but he did not argue to watch it. He's like, you're watching it without me. I was like, do you want to watch it? Hello? So it really wasn't for kids. It did not hold his attention, and it barely held mine. I never even got to the 3rd episode until later. And then I had to kind of force myself to watch episode 4. And then I kind of drifted off only when I saw a lot of real buzz on social media. I was like, oh, maybe I got to check out Andor. And boy, was I rewarded. So like you said, there is some incredible Star Wars just waiting in this. Why risk losing the audience off such a slow start with these superfluous storylines and plot lines? So I was disappointed as well with the opening. So there is criticism for Andor, and I think merited
and we can get past it because, I think most of the criticism is that section. Then we can get past it. Then I think it's very, very good filmmaking.
Right. And I think the other criticism, which could be a little bit of a double-edged sword because, you could see it on screen, the budget. The budgets for Andor season 1, they spent $250 million, which is an enormous amount of money for a TV show. And then Andor season 2 here, $291 million.
Yeah, but I saw it on the screen.
Exactly. That's the double-edged sword.
Other stuff, like, I never watched The Acolyte. I refuse to. But from what I've been told, people are like, there's no, where the hell is this alleged money? A couple $100 million. Where is it? I don't see it. I mean, this looks like a fan film with bad costumes. That's what I was told. And so, this, you can see it. They created a world. They created, I'm sure a lot of the CGI. I'm sure they didn't have practical buildings that were Coruscant, but it was expensive CGI to make you believe you were in this capital cities with all these incredible things, right?
Right.
And that's a lot of money. And we saw it on the screen.
Right. So that's the double-edged sword because Andor looks good. Mm-hmm. It looks good. And man, I was rewatching one of the episode 8, which, by the way, the centerpiece episode is episode 8 in this in season 2. It's one of the best Star Wars episodes I've ever seen. It'll be something I'll rewatch multiple times. And I was watching, I was like, man, this looks excellent. There is so much detail and genuine creativity in the look and design. If I had a criticism, you can even see in that picture right there. It's very French.
And that's kind of this fine. And people criticize Planet France or whatever. I I actually, I initially was jarred by it, by the extremely French resistance maquis, right? But then I kind of think, that's in line with Lucas. You've got stormtroopers and Nazi imagery as the
Totally, that's true.
right? And you've got sort of the British accents, which reminds Americans about their own empire that they overthrew. So the idea of the French resistance, and we're going back to Casablanca, right? So I kind of like that.
Yeah, and they have the flag waving. In fact, I wrote down the 3 movies I thought Andor kind of embodied. You have Casablanca. You had I put a little bit of the Hunt for Red October, because you have more of a bureaucracies and jockeying agencies and everything trying to get things done in a Cold War scenario. And then you've got the World War II nationalism and French resistance of Casablanca. And then you mix that with Star Wars. So you do get something kind of unique and special in Andor. In the end, I think it pays off. Even if some people might feel like it was a little too on the nose, I still think it pays off. And then also, I would say the 3, I think this was a pretty decent thing, if wasted in the beginning, but there was a 3-episode release. Now, the reason they did it, I think, is for watch time, for watch minutes, to help it chart. If they release 3 episodes, you're likely to watch all 3. That'll add more minutes. So it'll help it chart. But it also created this kind of new thing, in my opinion, of, you had 4 3-episode releases. So there's like 4 different arcs with 3 episodes. What did you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think 3 of those arcs worked. And so, yeah. And then you can think of it, if we just had 9 episodes, it would have worked fine. I think you could straight in on episode 4, right? So act 1, act 2, act 3, I think it worked very well. And then we sort of had a prologue that was unnecessary. That's how I see that. But I think it was well structured. I mean, when you said very at the beginning, there was always meant to be 2 seasons. In reality, it was actually meant to be multiple seasons. I reported that on Patreon. It was some years ago that they announced that they were going to just force him to ram this all into the 2nd season, right? That they decided they weren't going to give him multiple seasons. Retrospect, that might have been a mistake. That might have been a mistake of whichever regime it was. I don't know. It might have been the Chapek regime. I don't know who was making that decision, but it might have been a mistake, because as we now saw, I think any of these arcs could have been expanded into a full 9 episodes a year or 10 episode season. I cared enough, except for, again, part 1, which had they made that as a full season, would have destroyed the show. It's nothing there to sustain it. So starting with part 2. I think if they started with that and they expanded each of those to 9 to 12 episodes, you care enough about the characters, at least I do, that I would have been invested in watching 3 more years of this.
Totally. It got me thinking as a writer, what you just said, because after I watched episodes 7, 8, and 9, in which I was utterly gripped, and I'm talking like emotionally invested, my brain, I was intellectually invested. I was so into those episodes that by the time yesterday that episodes 10, 11, and 12 came out, I was on the edge of I was leaned forward. I was watching, like, I cared about every line of dialogue. I was so wrapped up in the drama and the character arcs on screen that it had my undivided attention.
I was on the edge of my seat that whole final 3 episodes. I was on the edge of my seat, with just all of the tension building. You know where this is going. Andor is going to survive at least until he gets to Rogue One. You're not sure about the other characters, right? And so, but you're very, very tense watching, Clea going through her infiltration. I think now we can start talking a little bit spoilers. We're about half an hour into this, right? I think we've done a little bit, some more information. Clea. Well, how do you want to?
Can I just give people the warning real quick?
Sure.
Okay, so everyone, we've been kind of discussing the general aspects of Andor as a series. We're about halfway through. We're going to end this at about the 1 hour mark. So we're about halfway through. We're going to get into some spoilers because there's going to be some specific things I'd like to discuss. So if you have not seen Andor and you were just curious about the discussion on whether or not you were going to go watch Andor, go watch it. It'll be worth your time. Be patient. But it gets to be 10 out of 10s in some of these episodes, and it ends so strong. So if that's what you wanted out of this discussion, I hope we convince you to go check it out because it is awesome. I would love to talk more about it with everyone else who's seen it. For those of you who had seen it, stick around because now we're going to talk spoilers. We're going to talk spoilers now. So if you're sticking around after this point, be prepared because we're going to
Yeah,
talk
and
about
if you're gonna go check it out, just put it on pause here and come back, because then you'll get some interesting analysis of what you've just seen. So yeah,
absolutely.
All right. So with that said, spoiler run begins, and so we'll start off with a small spoiler, which shouldn't be any kind of surprise in a show like this. Clea is going to essentially her own mini espionage thing, which is to infiltrate a hospital to get to her mentor, Luthen, who's been injured, is on life support, and is captured. And that whole sequence where she is individually, because they even say, I think rightly, the Imperials were trying to figure out how that incident played out afterwards. Like, well, they must have had a crack team of 3 or 4 people, and it's just one woman, outsmarting them. And believably, she isn't a Mary Sue. She's using whatever resources she has to get around the obstacles to get to her mentor, right? And then you discover why she's coming for her mentor, which, was emotionally very heartbreaking. I actually didn't expect it. I thought she was there to rescue him, and that's not what she's there to do, because that's not what Luthen would want her to do in that circumstance. She's been trained. She did what Luthen wanted her to do in that circumstance, which was very heartbreaking and very real.
It was heartbreaking, and by the way, I felt like real tension when she would, because it wasn't like this long-term plan, right? She had to make up her mind that she was going to infiltrate this hospital like right then and there. And so this was kind of an ad hoc infiltration on her part. And this film does not do, or this show did not do what a lot of bad writing, poorly written shows do, which is make it easy for her. She's looking around. There's stormtroopers over there. There's Imperial officers there. There's tanks right down there. This was well guarded. And so she's walking up toward this. You're like, oh my God, how's she going to get through all this? So the show showed you how she gets through all of this, and none of it was easy. And I got the sense this was a one-way ticket, and she ended up getting out, which I liked that she actually made it out, and I did like that the Imperials were rather baffled, like you said. They said it was a 3-man team, and then he's like, no, it was just that one person who did it, and she was effective, and it was poignant. It was an emotionally satisfying arc for him. I thought, because Luthen is one of the original characters in season 1. One of the driving forces of this whole narrative. And so I felt that was a very satisfying character arc for Luthen.
Absolutely. And I want to say the actor, so her name is Elizabeth Dulau. It sounds like it might be Eastern European in origin, but I think she's a British actress. I thought her whole journey is Emmy nominated, Emmy worthy material. I thought that
great.
She because her character was kind of minimized for 2 seasons, and then suddenly she rises to this occasion, but it's been so subtly built up that you can believe it. It's not like here's a side character, Moneypenny is suddenly out there fighting, alongside James Bond with no reference. This has been building, and then when she's forced to now act without her mentor being there, you see the training that he's given to her over 20 years to do this, and it's believable, and the actress just sold it. She just sold all the emotional journey. That whole episode that's dedicated to her flashbacks of how Luthen saved her as a child, right?
Godfather 2
and for a moment, I'll be honest, I was confused because he rescued her from some kind of Imperial attack. And for a moment, I thought, is she Cassian's sister? Which is the one thread that they actually did not resolve that thread. And I've read some interviews where Gilroy talks about why he didn't resolve it. But the Cassian in the opening episode of the first season, we see him as a child separated from his sister and longing, and he never does. For a brief moment, I thought, is she his sister, right? And that's not what she is, unless I misunderstood the end of the season. So it's, but there was that confusion for me as to, because I think he should have clarified that, because that was a mistake to just show her he's rescuing her, but as far as you could easily confuse that with Eldani, right? Because we don't see the external planet that they're rescuing her from. We just see her on the ship. So I was a little confused, and for a long time I thought, oh, she's actually the sister, and Cassian's going to have some great reveal by the end. But that's not who she is, and they leave unresolved, which I actually do like. I like the fact that Cassian never reunited with his sister. He never found out what happened to her. And it's the mystery that haunts him. It drives him. The one person he could not save, right, drives him to save all these other people and go back for all these other people, right? It's this compulsion, and it's also the tragedy of the world. in wars, families are displaced, people are
But,
disconnected, and they never see their relatives again. It is one of the most horrible, tragic parts of the human condition, is to be alive from a conflict and not know where your loved ones are and never find out. And that's a very real part of human history. And I think it was good that they did that.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a great assessment. And just looking into the chat, I could see even they were confused whether she was the sister. So you're right. There was some effective ambiguity, or I should say some effective unresolved issues, and then some ineffective ambiguity regarding this character. I also let's talk also about the character arc for Dedra. I thought I didn't like her character that much in season 1. She was very okay. She wasn't bad, but it
wasn't as complex a character. She was just playing the hard-nosed imperial intelligence person, right? Totally. Without more depth.
Well, and then in season 2, her character got infinitely complex, and she became someone that when she was on screen, she started to chew up the screen. Yeah. I started to really get into her character arc. And the fact that she's vulnerable, we've discussed this just in writing discussions. Vulnerability is such an important part to have in your characters. And they made her vulnerable in this. And even though you talked about the heroes on both sides part of Star Wars, she became one of the Imperials I accidentally started to cheer for in a weird way. I was like, is she going to get away? Is she going to get away with it? Are they going to get her? Or in the sense that like there were Imperials that I didn't want to beat her in this like jockeying for position. So her arc is terrible. Like she like in a good way, well written. She ends in a cell alone. The Empire turns on her. What did you think about her arc? And this is Denise Goff, by the way.
Yeah. Well, again, she's a wonderful actress because she had to play hard nosed, and then you realize she's actually quite capable of showing vulnerability, femininity, love, longing, grief, right? Fear, betrayal. The second season, she was allowed to show all of that. The only hint of it you saw in the first season was when she's rescued. At the end, I'm blanking on his name. I love the character, the gentleman she has a relationship with.
Cyril.
Cyril, thank you, Cyril. So he rescues her, and you can see the look on her face that somebody cared enough to save her life, right? And that she's been alone her whole life. That sold it, that there's more to this actress than what she's been given. And the second season, you discover that she's an orphan, that was the children of thieves. So, children of parents that are like that are considered social outcasts, often go out of their way to become very respected by society to erase the shame of that. Right. So if her parents were thieves, it makes sense that, she grew up in an imperial orphanage. The only people that took care of her were Imperials, and her parents were criminals. Right. And then she's got the people that whatever love or at least, support she got in that system, she emotionally imprinted on the Imperials as her only family. Right. The only people who care about her. And she's ashamed that her parents were criminals against society, so she's going to stop people like that. That's a very human character, but it's not an evil character, and they take her, someone that when she discovers that her actions are going to lead to the destruction of a planet and essentially a genocide or displacement of a whole people, right? She is actually torn, and her mentor, who's a brilliant actor, the one who plays the ISB security head, he knows her and says, control your emotions. He knows that she's going to care about this. And then the final moment of her alone in the cell, abandoned by the very system that she sacrificed everything for and held accountable for trying to save that system. And she's crying. It really broke my heart.
It did. That's what I'm saying. Like, I felt sympathy for her. Like, even in this scene that I have up on screen, there's it's a very chilling scene because Krennic is a pretty imposing Imperial, in my opinion. Yeah, I thought he was well handled in Rogue One, and he is great in Andor. He comes up behind her, and the way it's filmed, it kind of cuts off his eyes. He comes up, you just see him from the chin down, standing behind her, and at one point, he drops his finger on the top of her head. Right? Yes, he drops and he's just like, you are, basically, you could be a rebel, and I'm not going to take the chance in case you're not. And so you really feel like the Empire, the system that she has served so well, just completely turns on her. And I kept thinking she was either going to join the rebellion, or she was going to clear it up. And as this is actually, in my opinion, good writing. It didn't give me either. It didn't give me what I wanted. It gave me something more remote and hard that I had
and
to
more
deal
believable.
Where I was like, oh, she gets nothing. She gets nothing out of this.
Yeah, more believable. Just like Cassian never finding his sister, right?
Yes.
Just like her, she was raised by the devil. She worked for the devil betrayed her, and that's a tragic ending for her. One can, in one's own fantasy of this, can think maybe after the Empire fell, she was released and then she was incorporated back into society, but that's another 5 or 6 years away, right? Who knows how hardened she's going to be, what kind of person she'll be, whether she'll come out of there filled with bitterness and hatred, whether she would reconvene to society, whether they would ever release her. I mean, they could view her as a war criminal, right? Was she executed when they took back Coruscant? She could have been executed. I mean,
I mean, she had access to completely confidential files. So she made questionable decisions, which, in a more friendly, in a friendly written script, there's no consequence to her stealing, Imperial data.
Well, she knew about the Death Star. She knew what it could do, there's only a handful of people who knew about the Death Star at that point. So one can clearly say that, you were part of crime against, genocide. You were part of it.
Well, and I loved the scene when Krennic is like, say it. And she's like, the Death Star. And for some reason, when she spits it out loud for the first time, it just made the Death Star that much more intimidating, because you realize this was a bureaucratic secret buried in 1 million hard drives across the galaxy. And now she's saying this word out loud. And you realize, it's, we saw it in A New Hope when it was more of like a comic book, and I'm not saying this in a demeaning fashion, but more of a comic book super weapon, right? Now it's delivered in Andor as this chilling, like almost like, Trinity project.
Well, that's exactly the analogy I would do, because that's how the atom bomb was done. It was so compartmentalized, even though you had 100,000 people working on aspects of it, nobody knew they were building an atom bomb except for a handful of people at Los Alamos, right? And that's the genius of how that was done. And so, this is someone who broke into the system, who figured out that the Trinity thing is happening, and then used that for her own personal vendetta or her own effort to come across as a hero, right? Which led to disaster and ultimately led to the events that would cause the downfall of the Death Star, right? So, in some ways, she is, without having the intention, she is as responsible for the destruction of the Death Star as all the allies were.
Oh, yeah. Well, and so let's talk about Cyril here. This guy was kind of a tool, in my opinion, for a lot of the. He was a very beta male type. He wasn't, he was controlled by his mother, and just not an admirable character. He's kind of cringe, even, I would say.
He was for a while, and he grows. And you think that this guy's never going to grow, and he does remarkably. Yeah,
this guy had one of the most compelling arcs, in my opinion. By the time he became a man, he decided to take control of his life, and I felt for him. Shockingly, a character that I thought was disposable and annoying. When he realized that he was played, they actually wrote into the script him being a tool as part of his character arc, meaning you got played by the Empire. You weren't given the whole story. You were a little bit of a cuck, I guess you could say, to your wife. All of that plays out so richly in the way this character arc ends. He discovers basically that he was played while the revolution is occurring. He was, infiltrating the rebellion. He was organizing it. He was trying to attract outside agitators like Andor to this place. And now he realizes all he did was bring them here so that the Empire could stage a decisive blow and wipe out all these people so that they could take control of the planet of Gorman. And so he realizes this, and his character arc I thought was excellent.
Yeah, well, what he is, we talk about the French Revolution, he's Javert, Les Miserables. That's what he is. He's Javert. He's a guy who becomes obsessed with someone he sees as a criminal. He's hunting Cassian because, again, he's coming from a place of like you said, he's been someone who has been essentially clipped. His wings have been clipped at home from an abusive, psychologically controlling mother. He doesn't have a father figure in his life. So he's very archetypal of sort of that, as you said, beta male, who's been, hamstrung from his masculinity, and then trying to find his masculinity by being respected, by being, admired in society, and using his skills. He's pretty organized and he's actually intelligent, right?
Yeah.
And so he's able to use those skills to slowly but surely track Andor, and he becomes Javert. It becomes this obsession. It becomes like Moby Dick, Ahab and Moby Dick. He can't stop,
Right.
and that's, I think, what the brilliance of the writing of his end, which is that by the time he has seen the horror of what he unleashed, and you can tell he is not on board with the massacre that he's witnessing, that this isn't who he is, this isn't who he wants to be, and he's ashamed of it, and he's filled with guilt, disillusioned. But when he sees Andor, he goes after him to try to kill him, because ultimately he's blaming Andor. It's like he knows that he was played into this. But why was he played into this? It was his obsession with Andor that was the hook in to this, how the Empire could manipulate him. So in some ways, he's attacking himself when he's attacking Andor, right? Yeah, and then it's actually really wonderful writing when Andor has no idea who the hell this guy is. This guy's been obsessed with him for 5 years and has been hunting him down. And Andor doesn't even know who he is. And he says to him when he's got the gun on him, when it looks like he's going to kill Andor, Andor's like, "Who are you? Literally, who are you? I mean, why are you even trying to kill me?" And that hits the actor so brilliant. That hits him, Cyril, so well, because he doesn't know who he is anymore. That's why he
lowers the gun.
Yeah.
He actually he has his gun on Andor, and then he lowers the gun,
and then boom.
When Andor says that. And by the way, I thought it's brilliant writing, because how, as a writer, you're tasked, what is he going to do? And he attacks Andor. It's a pure projection of anger, and I thought it was great. And I've even seen, not in a funny or comical way, that has become already on social media. Who are you? It's already become its own force in terms of a message in a character arc that, your greatest enemy, you haven't even met this guy. The obsession was faceless. So we are running out of time. So I wanted to focus on one of the more major character arcs here. We've got to talk about the woman that we all remembered from Return of the Jedi, Mon Mothma. This was our one introduction to her character. She brought a level of dignity to the rebellion in the original trilogy when we finally saw her in Return of the Jedi. And I rewatched Return of the Jedi since watching Andor, and her gravity in this scene actually makes more sense to me after seeing Andor, because she is very somber in the Return of the Jedi, and she's like, we've learned some major stuff from the Empire. The Emperor himself is personally overseeing the final construction of the Death, and it's a very chilling moment. And then she's like, many Bothans died to bring us this information. So she's compassionate about the people who passed the baton, who were killed in this pursuit. So this woman, who is she? Man, Andor delivers, in my opinion, on Mon Mothma. I think she's a perfect heroine for the Heroine's Labyrinth, by the way. Yeah. But she has some incredible scenes in Andor, and my opinion is that they elevated this character, which is what great writing can do, which is what you hope a series can do. Take something small and expand upon it. I think with her, possibly even more so than Andor himself, this show expanded this character and made her legendary in her exploits. What did you think about her speech to the Senate?
Well, I mean, I think the speech was a bit truncated. I think that's the whole point, is they cut it off right before she could really get deep into it. But more than the speech, I just want to talk about Genevieve O'Reilly, I believe is her name, the actress, right, who plays her. The actress is just majestic. And this is another Emmy-worthy performance throughout. And I really hope she gets nominated because I think she could win it, because she's essentially the female lead of this show, right?
I agree.
And you see the full range of her, from the luxury of the pampered world on Chandrila, and her family, and the sacrifices she's making, even in her own family. She marries off her daughter to her teenage daughter to a teenage boy as a political arrangement to pay off certain debts, right? And she's willing to do that within her own family, her own blood, right? For politics, for survival. So you have someone who is very much about personal survival, but it's also somebody who is growing from personal survival to something much bigger, right? And that's why when Andor says to her, when he's rescuing her near the end of this show, welcome to the rebellion, she has been part of the rebellion. She's been self-interested. She's been helping this group of people, but it's because the world she knows is dying. And her status in that world is dying. And that's really the arc of her. And the symbolic of it is, and again, it brings back the genius of bringing it back to Return of the Jedi, is that by the finale of the show, you see her back, and she's in these elegant clothes with beautiful coiffed hair. You see her in a shortcut bob right hair that we saw in Return of the Jedi, which is her cutting off her elegance, and we see her eating in the mess hall with dirty soldiers, which she would never have done as an affluent socialite. That is her arc, right? And so that we understand the person that she becomes, so that you feel the compassion of Return of the Jedi, because that actress who played her in that was also brilliant, because we never forgot her. We remember her lines. She was there for all of 2 minutes, and we remember her because she brought so much gravitas, right, to the thing. And that actress was selling that she's had a lot of loss and pain and suffering. The Bothans are just the last of a long group of people that she's had to lose for this. I mean, and now we see she lost her family. We never see her husband, I guess, at the end is off with somebody else, right? Affair with the other guy's wife. And the daughter you never see again. So she's estranged from her own family. She's lost everything. And the loss that it guided her to this, now we understand the pain of the woman in Return of the Jedi. And that's the genius of Genevieve O'Reilly's performance. I mean, you look at her, she looks just like the actress from Return of the Jedi by the end, right?
100%.
And she has the same gravitas.
Well, and she also she makes Mon Mothma her own character, right? She's not emulating anybody. Yep. She, there's the Mon Mothma of season 1, like you said, who's entrenched in a luxurious, affluent position within the society. And there's a lot of whispers and like low tones. And as you see her through season 2, you see her realizing that there is no compromise. And it really hit me when she's delivering her speech, when she's like, the monster who will come after all of us is Emperor Palpatine. And she says it in front of the Senate. I was like, oh, man.
And they're booing her. They're booing her.
Yes.
It's the opposite of the scene of thunderous applause when when the senators vote him Emperor for life. They give it to him. He didn't seize it. They vote him Emperor for life, right? And they thunderous applause, right? And so now they're booing her for saying, we created this monster. We created it.
Yeah. And so I would love to bring what you said. I love that you want her to be nominated and if not win an award for her performance, because one thing that we should mention about Andor season 2 and season 1 is the absence of legacy characters, which is a crutch that all Star Wars seems to lean on. This show really avoided that. They took maybe some D-list characters from the original trilogy and brought them in.
Bail Organa, who's just mentioned in the original movies and then seen with Jimmy Smits in the prequels, right? That's the only bridge character.
Right, totally. And by the way, I just want to give a quick nod to Benjamin Bratt. Some people were upset that Jimmy Smits was replaced, and I get that because I hate when they replace actors or actresses because it breaks continuity. However, I want to make the case that Jimmy Smits was perfect for George Lucas's prequels. He was a charming guy. He was likable. He had a little bit of that career path. This guy was much more serious. This guy fit the Tony Gilroy world of Andor, and I thought he made a great Bail Organa. It didn't take long for me to forget that they swapped the actor.
I ended up buying into him. I was sad Jimmy Smits was gone. He's not gone. I mean, I'm sure they'll bring him back. Who knows? I think there was some political. I don't even think he wasn't available. I'm sure Jimmy Smits would be happy to keep playing this. He's been playing this into the Kennedy era, right? So he's been playing this character. Something happened that we don't know behind the scenes. Some political thing happened, I believe, that didn't allow him to come, or he wasn't allowed by Kennedy or whatever it was. But I think Mr. Bratt did an amazing job, and the character that was written for him and the things he had to do that we're now seeing would have been a harder sell from Jimmy Smits. I think because Jimmy Smits comes across as a fundamentally sort of teddy bear like decent person. Benjamin Bratt has an edge to him. He has an edge to him, and let's make the argument that that's what we needed to do with the character, because we really didn't see what Jimmy Smits was doing in the rebellion. Even in Rogue One, we just see him talking about his daughter, and then he goes off and he's going to get blown up when he gets back to Alderaan, right? We don't even see that. So we don't really know. We saw in Obi-Wan a little bit of him being a ruler with his wife on Alderaan, but we don't see him dealing with the ugliness because he's the one that chooses to stay. Mon Mothma escapes. And he doesn't come with her. So he stays another year. another year inside this collapsing institution of the Senate without where Mon Mothma is now a refugee, and you can imagine that a consequence was set in place by her actions. You can imagine that there was maybe some senators supported her speech and now they've been arrested, or it's been a difficult year where things have gotten darker and darker and darker. And Bail Organa is the product of someone now trying to survive the actual clamping down of the empire on the Senate.
According to Wikipedia, he died on Alderaan when they blow it up.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, he died on Alderaan.
Just to wrap up the conversation, I think this show ended nicely in terms of fitting into Rogue One, where K2SO, I did like his arc, how they brought him into this, and how chilling the KX droids were in this show. They were like Terminators.
Oh, they were really scary, and that's why you now really appreciate the good KX droid.
Yeah, and the thing that scared me the most was there was one quick scene. I thought they should have done this more. There's one scene where, because they show them kind of walking slow. Yeah. There's one scene where it starts to chase the guy. I was like, ah.
Oh yeah, no, they're scary. There was a scene that they were creepy. There was a scene where you see like I forget which character it was. One of the characters walks in and all the KX droids are sitting, staring down, and then one looks up and stares at him and like really chilling, like I'm going to kill you, right?
And guess what? Someone did an analysis of the chipped paint on the droid that stares them down in that scene is K. Is this droid?
Is our K. Well, that makes sense. I mean, that's otherwise, why would you care about that character, right? So it shows that he's already different from the others. He's perceptive, right? He knew he probably was like, you could tell he was like staring into the soul of this human being. Maybe that guy's not who he appears to be. Right. And so it's semi-individualistic, which is great. And so he was the right one for them to turn. So I do have to start winding down. There's so much more to talk about. And we will be talking, I'm sure, again, because I think Andor is going to lead to a lot of conversation. I hope that this kind of sophisticated storytelling will be continued under Jon Favreau. I know he wants to. I think Mr. Gilroy was probably out. I think he's done what he's supposed to do. I don't think he's going to come back. But I would like to see this kind of storytelling, moving forward into the Favreau timeline, and that's what I call it. I think this kind of storytelling will really make the adult fans happy, and then Favreau's smart enough to keep the kids buying toys.
Well, and totally. And what Gilroy has done is he has opened up a new room in Star Wars, serious Star Wars, and now if we hear this is in the tradition of Andor or this is another serious Star, now we know what we're talking about here, and there might be a real appetite for this kind of Star Wars going forward, and there wasn't before. So I think this did do something unique and special to Star Wars. I'm glad about Andor season 2. I was geeking out about it. I called my dad. I was like, oh my God, you won't believe how good Andor is. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. And if you have seen it, I hope you enjoyed our conversation tonight. We will be having more conversations. And Kamran, I just want to say thanks for joining us tonight and sharing your insight and perspective on the writing, the film work, and the general story and attitudes for Andor seasons 1 and now season 2 in the books.
I appreciate you having me on, and and it's always great to be here. So, two things I just want to pitch before I go. One is that unfortunately, we had a guest that could not make it today. Paulie from Latino Slant wanted to come, but he had other obligations. But I'm going to be on this Friday on Latino Slant, as I always am, at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Talking. We're going to talk more Andor and get his perspectives on it. I'm sorry he couldn't join the panel today. And also, come join me on my Patreon. This is we're having this kind of sophisticated discussion amongst the things. Some of the most interesting conversations. I put up open threads where just Patreon members are talking about Andor, and we're having really sophisticated conversations. I'm just watching. I'm not even participating in them. I'm just watching people's comments back and forth that are adding very deep analysis, right? So come join me on Patreon. We'll throw a link in. I'm sure you can see it. So yeah.
And everyone, click like and subscribe if you like these conversations. I hope to host many more and have more discussions on storytelling, pop culture, and a special place for Star Wars for me. So that's it, everybody. Good night, and may the Force be with you.